Good morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. And what beautiful people I get to look at, right? It's good to see everybody today. And welcome to not just a beautiful Sabbath Torah study, but to a very special day for so many people. Christopher Rail, his family, all of us in the fellowship, all you visitors and guests who've come to share this day with us. This is going to be a special occasion. We'll get more into that after a little break. First of all, we were going to have our usual gathering, discuss the revelation of Torah, the wisdom of the creator of the universe to give man guidance as to how we should live upon the earth, why we're alive on the earth, what the purpose of man is, what the purpose of our lives individually and collectively as a group are. So basically that's where we'll start today, by kind of catching us up. The creator of the universe has not left us alone. Thank heaven. He has planned, he has designed, he has orchestrated a way in which he could commune with us, could visit with us, could introduce us to him personally and to his ways and his plan. So we're not just here trying to figure it out. At least we're not supposed to be just here trying to figure out day by day what life is to be about. We are here to fulfill the plan of the Holy One and to join him and delight in him, in his persona and his attributes and his character, and be caught up in the vision for what he wants to do with the universe and with the world and with our spheres of influence, our households, our families, our workplaces, our marketplaces, our cities, our villages, our era, the times that we live in, what he wants to do in those times. And so we talk about here the book this week, this whole season, we're in the book of Deuteronomy. We study one section of the book of the 5 books every week, and we're now in the latter part of the biblical year. And so we're studying Deuteronomy, the last of the 5 books. And in this particular section, Moses is 120 years old, and he knows that his time on earth is about to end. And this is his final set of messages. He has 35 days to impart to Bnei Israel, the people of Israel, but more so to all who will read this book in all generations to come, which includes you and me, but it also includes generations that will come after us. This book is an eternal book designed to release the wisdom of the plan of the creator of the universe for implementation by people who are surrendered to that plan. So the grand plan of the creator is being released. If I had drums here, we'd have a drum roll. And you'd hear the sounds of the song Mission Impossible playing on over the loudspeakers. And you'd understand that what we're called to sounds impossible. The mission that we are called to fulfill, to engage in, participate in, bring to the earth, sounds like a dream. It sounds like an idealistic concept that you'd hear about in an ivory tower somewhere, and everybody would say, if only that could happen. And so what's the plan? What's the idea? The plan of the Holy One, the grand plan, is for mankind as a species to be redeemed. Bloodline by bloodline, household by household, individual by individual, as many as will heed the call of the Creator and as many as will come. Many will not, but those who will be invited to come and feel and receive and embrace and begin to be vessels of the redemption of the Holy One he's designed for mankind. The second part of the plan is even more glorious than the first. The second part of the plan is after he does this work, or as he's doing this work of redemption in mankind, one at a time, bloodline by bloodline, as he's doing that, he is bringing about another great part of the plan, which is the restoration of creation to its original intended state of beauty, fruitfulness, and shalom, like unto Eden, like the Garden of Eden. And he's bringing this back to place. And we say, mission impossible. We can't do this. It's too much for us. He says, no, it's not. It's all in your perspective. It's all in your worldview. It's all in the situation of which road you wish to follow. So we are in the portion of Moshe's discourse, the teachings that are I call the two pathways, or the diverging pathways discourse. It started with chapter 4 of Deuteronomy. It's going to go all the way, well, almost all the way to the end of the book. There's one more little thing he's going to do at the end of the book, calling us to covenant and make a commitment one way or other. He's like an evangelist at the end of his message, giving an invitation. And that's what Moshe is going to do at the end of his book, is give us an invitation. Are you in or are you out? Are you part of this or not? But before he gets to there, he's laying out the entire infrastructure plan, the entire design as to how this grand plan for the redemption of mankind as a species and for the restoration of creation to its intended Edenic state, it can be accomplished. And it can be accomplished, and it will be accomplished, but this is the plan of the Holy One. Now, that being the plan, we have this issue of the two roads. What are the two pathways? So, Tony, I'm going to let you kind of speak into what these two pathways are. Basically, the pathway of one and the pathway of the other, and we get ready and go for it and kind of describe what the two pathways we can follow. You can choose to follow one of two pathways in life.
I like this particular time of the year. As you know, this is my favorite time of the year. We get into the fall Moedim. But as we talk about the two pathways, the King's Highway and then the way of the raging nations. And the nations are raging right now. There's evidence of our nation in rage. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of intensity, negative intensity that we're having to deal with and address and face and live through. Along with the raging nations are the narrative that the raging nations will put out and reframe. Yes, go for it.
Let me interrupt you just for a second till they get the microphone. Yeah, there we go. Tap it a little bit, yeah. The other mic. While he's doing that, adjusting that, I'm going to tell you that the two pathways are the pathway of the king, the King's Highway, the way in which the Holy One is laid out for us to walk. And the other way, as what Tony has mentioned, it is the way of the raging nations. Why do the nations rage? Why do the peoples imagine a vain thing? It says in Psalm 2. The idea is there is a whole worldview, a whole mindset that has infiltrated us, unfortunately. We are all victims of it from time to time because we watch the television and we see the internet and we read books, and now we take onto ourselves this pathological worldview that the world is here for us to rage about. The world is here for us to be outraged about. The world is here to be us to be offended by. The world is here for us to complain about. The world is here for us not to be happy about, but to see how horrible it all is and talk about how horrible it all is. That's the way of the raging nations. Now, before we get started and Tony begins to detail some of the issues that we're going to face, can we get back on the King's Highway? How do we exit? How do we break free of the madding throng, the masses, the multitudes that are traveling this way of the raging nations, break free in our heads, break free in our hearts, and begin to pursue again the pathway of the King, the King's Highway, the glorious way of redemption and restoration? How do we do that? Those will be the kind of issues that we'll face today. What are the obstacles? What are the challenges? Why do we not break free? Even though we have religion, even though we have some level of faith in some form of a God or some form of a Messiah, even though we have some trust in the Bible as being a trustworthy source of wisdom and revelation, even yet, why are we still on the road? Why are we, though we do all these religious things, why are most of us still on the road of the raging nations? Why haven't we changed? Why haven't we adjusted our behavior and our thought patterns and our conversations and even our thought processes to the King's Highway? Well, what will it take for us for it to happen? And what are the obstacles along the way? So go ahead, Tony, talk about it.
Okay, I think we're back. All right, that's okay. Thank you. It's just all about a button. Yeah, I'm sorry. So when we were talking about the King's Highway, I was thinking about his way, his will, his wisdom, his way of doing things. And what happens is we get off, right, from we are on the King's Highway, but we get distracted. And the raging of the world and the sounds, the behavioral things that we see, the activities that's going on in the world has a tendency of distracting us and sometimes even luring us into the activities of the world. And so we get entangled, right? We get entangled in the affairs of this world and we lose sight of what's really important, the King's Highway, staying on task. We have a season that helps us deal with that. We have a time of the year that helps us emphatically deal with that. We should be dealing with it always, right? We should always have a discernment. But we have a time of the year, we're in that right now, it's called Teshuvah. It's about 40 days of consciously turning to the Holy One and aligning with his will and his ways. And these are manifested in practical, observable changes. I like to call it transformation, right? God's not trying to improve us, right? He's changing us. We're changing. And in this change process, we keep cycling through this change process, and every year there should be growth there. There should be more evidence of the transformation. What I like to do in this year or in this time of the year is I like to use Teshuvah to reflect on areas that I may have drifted, right?
You introduced the term Teshuvah. Now, the English speakers might be used to the term repentance. And this time of year, we believe it was, Yeshua came forth and actually began, it says, in those days. There's a certain key. There's a Hebrew key to the word in those days, in these days, in the days right before the fall festivals. In those days, the precious days, Yeshua came forth beginning to declare, and in English we read, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which is, of course, code words, Hebrew. He would have spoken it in Hebrew, or at the very least Aramaic, but more than likely it was Hebrew. And he would have said, make teshuvah. Yes. You. No matter where you are, turn. Turn not what you're away from. You're turning to someone who made you, the one who created you. Turn back to him. What would it look like if you left where you are and went back to him? Went back to his side, got caught up in his majesty, his beauty, got caught up in his goodness and his holiness. What if you got caught up in the pull, the draw, the magnetism of who he was? Turn to him. Teshuvah. That's the idea. Now, in so doing, there's a power that's exerted against us. Our spirits are drawn like steel to a magnet. And we come into the Holy One. Turn, there's this power. And what Yeshua was saying was not make a change in your mind like the English theologians teach you. It was to get caught up in the draw, the pull, the magnetism of the persona of the God that created you and designed you. Get caught up in this. Make teshuvah. Yield your spirits to go into his presence and be changed, be transformed by being in his presence. So that's the first term, teshuvah.
As we're drawn, right? One of the things that I like to say about biblical lifestyle, right, is that the turning, we're consciously turning, but we're turning to the biblical lifestyle. It's seen in practical ways. For me, Papa B, as I turn to the Holy One, as I turn to his ways and his wisdom, there is this love that's in my heart that begins to burn. I become more compassionate toward people. That's one of the fruits to me. That's the fruit of teshuvah, is your attitude is adjusted, right? Because the raging of the world tends to affect your attitude. It affects the way you interact with other people, how you interact with your family, how you react to things that happen in your family, in your lives. We're going to learn today the true sense of justice, what that really looks like, a practical look in justice. We're going to learn about leaders, right, and what that looks like from a kingdom standpoint. Gatekeepers is my favorite thing that you said here. We're going to learn what gatekeepers are. Christopher is entering
The gatekeeping mode.
the gatekeeping mode. And we're proud to have Christopher enter that gatekeeping mode.
You want him on that gate. You want him on that wall.
Yes, we've been, and this is a part of this whole thing is we get a chance to watch the younger ones come up and prepare to be gatekeepers, because there is a preparation for that, and the families have a lot to do with that. But that's what I see when I talk about the King's Highway versus the raging nations.
The idea of teshuvah is the first step. Now, we get to what is teshuvah and why is teshuvah. I want to talk to you about the twofold plan. If we're going to lay out the summary of what Moshe is going to teach us on this two pathways discourse, it's going to be that it's a two-stage plan. The first one is, and I'll use these Hebrew words and I'll define them for you, tikkun adam, tikkun adam. And the second one, the second phase, is tikkun olam. Fix man. Fix, tikkun is to repair, to bring wholeness to bring wellness back to repair the broken places, to fix the places that are wounded and scarred and broken and affected adversely by the raging nations and by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare would say. The idea of man is broken, and God needs to fix man before he can fix his world. So tikkun adam is a Hebrew phrase used to determine what we do individually in our individual lives. The first man that God has to fix is you. It's not the governors. It's not the alcaldes. It's not the mayors. It's not them. It's you, and it's me on an individual microcosm basis. He needs to heal us, or at least be in the process of healing us. And so this tikkun adam is what will precede. We're going to go to tikkun olam, which is fix the world. Fix the creation. Bring healing to the broken parts of the created order. The waters that overrun, the weather that goes crazy, the patterns of drought and flood and storm and volcano. Fix the world to where it is a peaceful ecosystem that nurtures and encourages. Do you want that? Okay, so this is the plan. Mission Impossible sounds like in the background. Dun, 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 dun. Now here we are. Tikkun Adam will flow into Tikkun Olam, but until we get Tikkun Adam in process, we are incapable of even seeing the prospect, much less engaging in the process of Tikkun Olam. So the key factor in this is going to start off with being teshuvah. Remember how we define teshuvah. Wherever you are in this moment, if you're going to enter into this plan, if you're going to volunteer for this mission the Creator of the universe has for us, then teshuvah is number one on the plate. Number one on the list. That means that for everyone sitting in a chair in this room, everyone in this place, everyone listening to the sound of my voice, there is a call from heaven going out to you. In your spirit, you'll begin to hear it. In your flesh, you may not hear it. In your ears, you may not hear it. But somewhere out, you pull this draw, unless you are of seared conscience, unless something's happened to you, and something, whether it be world events or personal tragedy or trauma, or some other form of propaganda the world has put out, has seared your conscience. Otherwise, you're hearing this pull, this draw saying, come forth, come back, come home. The Creator of the universe wants you to come home, not just to get away from your sin. That's important. Get away from your hurt and your feelings and your anger and your all offenses and all. It's important to get away from that, but that's not the goal. The goal is to get back to Him. Back to that moment in Genesis 2:7. That moment, that beautiful moment that was sort of the key of everything. When the Holy One picked up this creation he called Adam. He picked him up in some way in which we don't even understand metaphysically how he did that. But he grabbed it and personally got involved and brought Adam, who had been living as a nephesh, as a soul. But he brought this Adam into his embrace, eyeball to eyeball, as best we know how to do that with the Creator of the universe, the Spirit. And he brought him to it, and he breathed, and then the Holy One breathed his very own life force into Adam. And Adam became more than a nephesh, more than a soul, more than a creature, more than an animal, more than even a man. He became a man infused with the very presence and attributes and nature and character and purposes of his Creator, of our God. That's the moment we want to get back to. We want to get back to that moment of feeling, receiving, embracing that breath. And that's what the Holy One wants for us. That's what our God wants for us. Because in that moment, in that power, in that touch, in that time of teshuvah, we can then begin to see things we couldn't see before. We can see beyond offenses. We can see beyond ethnicities. We can see beyond anger. We can see beyond generational differences we have with other people. We can see beyond all that stuff, and we see spirit to spirit. And in spirit to spirit conversation, we can see the vision, the prospects, and the pathway and the strategies necessary to get there. So, tikkun olam. And so the Holy One's calling you, and Moshe has been laying out for us what in the first parts of Deuteronomy, he's been laying out for us what I call micro teshuvah, or micro tikkun. On the small level, on the most organic level, which is you and me. How do we change? How does he transform us? Because he starts with us. And the first thing he taught us is about fear of the Holy One. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? It all has to start with the fear of the Lord. It all has to start. And fear of the Lord, yirat Adonai in Hebrew, means that you see him for who he is. You see him as real. You see him as existing. You see him as engaged with his creation. You see him as overwatching everything you do, and directing and choreographing everything in the world, and managing in a great ecosystem. And you see him in this regard, and you see him, and therefore his power, his majesty, but his goodness, all gather together, and we respond to it in humility. We respond to it without arrogance, without trying to impose our will upon him. Instead, we come to him humbly and bow before him and say, what is your will concerning the earth? What is your will concerning me? That's the idea of yirat Adonai. It starts with yirat Adonai. How are you doing on the fear of the Lord? Are you even conscious of his existence? I know we all wouldn't probably be in this room today if we didn't say we believed in God. But you and I both know belief in God and being in his presence and seeing his majesty and understanding his engagement with the world and what he wants to do is a whole nother story. To engage with the creator of the universe in his majesty and his goodness and his power is a whole lot more than just believing intellectually that he exists somewhere. Now do you know him? And so the issue is, I don't know, how are we doing on that? Could we stop right now and just ask ourselves, take an inventory of our souls. Ask yourself, do I really see you for who you are? Is my perspective of you colored by theology and religion? Or do I know you? Have I talked to you personally, not through the medium of some religious form? Have I conversed with you? Have you breathed upon me? Has your breath, your spirit, awakened, quickened the eternal in me, that beautiful thing that lasts forever? Have you quickened that in me? Am I alive? And am I living and breathing, or am I on life support? Are buildings like this where we go to have fellowship, are they a life support mechanism for us? Or are we able to communicate on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment basis? Do we just go to get a fix and a shot of oxygen? Or are we actually always breathing? Now, this is testing the analysis to ask is, how are you doing on the fear of the Lord? Because you see, if we're going to fulfill the plan, if we're going to see beyond the problems of the world and the things that trigger our reactions emotionally, intellectually, relationally, ethnically, if we're going to get beyond that and actually be part of his plan and cooperate, coordinate with the Messiah to fulfill this plan, if we're to do that, we have to learn who he is and what he does. So yirat Adonai. The next thing is Shema Israel. This is the book in which he's taught us, Hear, O Israel. idea is this. If he's real and if he's engaged, he's speaking. He's saying things. He is releasing conscious, directed words into your spirit and to awaken who you are and to call you forth and to give you direction. So Shema Israel is not just about, okay, I'm listening. No, it's like my wife really looks at me sometimes and says, are you listening? I said, uh-huh. No, I don't mean that. I mean, are you listening? Is your eye focused on me? Is your ear tuned to me? Are you also watching television? Are you also talking on the phone? Are you also looking at your scroll on Facebook? What are you doing? Are you listening to me? Well, beloved, how good are we at listening to God? Shema Yisrael. Shema, people of the covenant. Shema, people of the strategy of the war. Shema, people. Now, this issue of, and Shema means to tune our whole soul to the true tone that we hear coming from God. Like a guitar. You know, you play guitar, Troy, you know, and you let it sit for about a month in open air, and you go back and you pick it up and you strum the strings. Ooh. Because you see, atmospheric conditions, heat, cool, changes in temperature, they cause the string to kind of get lazy and fall out of tune, out of its pitch, off pitch. So now each one does it a little bit differently, and so when you strum it, it's like they're all off. And now you have to begin to go back and hear true tone, either play it on a piano or hear true tone and tune those strings one by one back to where they reproduce the true tone. Wow, now that's what Shema means. So how are we doing at getting back to true tone, not being so affected by our environmental conditions, by the heat, the cold, other things that are going on in the world, and begin instead to get back where we reflect. When we open our mouth, it's the true tone. When we see and give our countenance, show our countenance to other people, and we look upon them or shake their hand or say hello, do they actually sense the true tone of heaven coming out from us? Whenever we behave, whenever we leave a place, do we leave it with the scent, the fragrance, the aroma of heaven, or are we off tune? Or we sound like a guitar that's out of tune, that doesn't sound at all the way it should be? This is the issue of Shemaing Israel. And I think he says the other one, I'm going to go quickly because we want to get into the Parsha, but the other, one of the things he taught us is Ahavat. Ahavat Adonai. I told you that Yirat Adonai is a Hebrew phrase that we usually translate as fear of the Lord. Ahavat Adonai, Ahava, is love. So if Yirat Adonai is fear of the Lord, Ahavat Adonai is loving the Lord. Moshe's been teaching us, love the Holy One your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Pursue it. Engage with it. Make this your goal to keep increasing in love for the Holy One. Say, how do I love someone I can't see? The easiest way possible, because sometimes you see them, you don't want to love them. Love them. And the idea is building this response of the human being back to this Maker. There is a natural urge in your spirit to respond to Him with joy, with gladness. If you're feeling anger toward Him or offense toward Him or you're blaming Him for your world, you've lost your love. The love is what you should begin to feel. And so he said, Ahavat Israel, Ahavat Adonai is critical. You must build this love for God. You must cultivate it. You must work at it. It is labor. It's like a marriage. If you think you're going to get married, everything's going to be wonderful. And your relationship's going to keep building, getting better and better. You don't understand the way relationships work. Relationships are give and take, up and down. Relationships have their good moments and their bad moments. And the question is, will you persevere? Will you keep pressing in? And will you learn from the mistakes that you just made and that the other person just made and still begin to push toward? This is loving the Holy One your God. Now, he told us what love of the Holy One your God is. Yeshua taught it. First Moshe taught it. Then Yeshua picked up what Moshe said. What does love a Holy One mean? What are the fruit of loving the Holy One? If you love me, anybody? If you love me, what? If you love me, what? Who said that? The master rabbi, Yeshua himself. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. There is no different. You can't love me and not keep my commandments. You can do all sorts of things and say you love me, but unless you keep my commandments, you haven't loved me. Now, this is the challenge of the Ahavat Adonai. He said, and Ahavat Adonai, the love of the Holy One, as you develop it, cultivate it, nurture it, you will find it leads to something else. This is what Tony was mentioning. That's Ahavat Re'echa. Again, a Hebrew phrase. Ahavat, again, love. Who did love this time? Your neighbor. Re'echa, your neighbor. The one who shares the pasture of the earth with you. The one, this includes not just your next door neighbor, not just the one who lives in your neighborhood. Anyone who shares the entire ecosystem of the earth, you will love that person because they are also made by the Creator. Not because of what they did or what they didn't do. Not because of what ethnicity they are, or what race they are, or what gender they are, or how pretty they are, or how ugly they are, or how good an athlete they are, or how good they can sing, or how intelligent they are. You love them because they are the artwork of the Creator of the universe. And you have to overcome the other things that would keep you from loving them. So this idea of Ahavat Re'echa is one of the critical processes. So he's taught us these things over the past few chapters of Deuteronomy to teach us Tikkun Adam. And we should hopefully, if you've been engaged in this process, if these things are awake in you, even if I've just awakened them this morning, if this process is alive, then you should be beginning to heal. Your scars, your wounds, your areas of brokenness, your triggers of anger and of offense and of worry and anxiety and of intimidation, your triggers, your buttons that people can push should be beginning to soothe back, and shalom should beginning to flood, at least begin to pour out in little bits of sprinkling water upon your soul. That's the beginning of step one, because this week we go beyond the Tikkun Adam, the beginning of the healing of the man, to the beginning of the healing of the world. Now, this is where it gets, we thought it was complicated to do Ahavat Israel, Ahavat Re'echa, Ahavat Adonai, Yirat. We thought all that was complicated. Mission impossible. We're going to do this on a socialized basis. Ooh, we're going to do this with other human beings that we don't even know or like. We're going to do this in the city gates. We're going to do this in our house gates. We're going to do this in our nation's gates. We're going to do this in our tribes, ethnicities' gates. We're going to meet people that are going a different direction with different ideas and different concepts, and they mostly got the worldview of the nations, right? The warring, the raging of the nations, and we've got to be the adult in the room that carries what? Tikkun Adam, the healing that's going on in us, that doesn't overreact to their evil, to their darkness, to their badness. Now, this idea of the Tikkun Olam, here's the deal. We have to share space. Now, you're sitting around tables today in our room here, so you kind of understand what it's like to share space. Some of you would like a little more room. We're in Texas, and in Texas, we like our space, right? We like our personal space, and you come into a room like this, and you have to sit at tables, and you feel like, well, I'm a little closer to that person than I would ordinarily want to be. But it's okay because I'm focused on something. I'm doing something. As long as I focus on what's going on here, I don't think about somebody's in my space. Well, everybody in the world you meet is like that. They have their space. They have their boundaries that they become uncomfortable if you get into them. And you have to understand you're going to get uncomfortable if they get in your space. So it's just, there's a physical aspect of space, but it's more than that. They've come into this whole idea with an aura and a worldview. They're feeling a certain way. And they don't want you messing with how they're feeling. If they're angry, they don't want you happy. If they're offended, they don't want you making peace. If they're intimidated, they don't want you to tell them it's going to be all right. They want us bask in the negativity because that's what the raging nations do. Now, we come to all these different locations, all these gates. And every time we come to a gate, there's going to be other people there. We're going to have to take our tikkun adam out of our own life and begin to apply it to other people's lives in ways that honor the King, that aren't preachy, that don't offend and push them aside, but that carry the very same call of, come home. There's a reason to come home. Don't you want to know him? Don't you want to sense him? Don't you want to feel him? This is the idea of how we're going to communicate that. So we have to learn to have measured doses of the things that are the attributes of God. Measured doses of mercy. There are certain times mercy is not appropriate. Most of the time it is. At some level or another, one level or another of mercy is appropriate. That's why when the creator of the universe spoke to Moshe at the cleft of the rock, the first attribute he described of himself after talking about his existence and of his continuing existence was merciful. If we have lost mercy, and this is a question that will be thrown out to the group here, each individual in your own place, in your own spot at the table, have you forsaken mercy? Have you chosen a way of wrath? Have you chosen a way of judgmentalism and criticism of other people? Or have you considered the possibility of maintaining mercy? Now, this whole discourse, this two pathways discourse of Moshe, started with Deuteronomy 3:23, Parsha et Canaan, unto grace I came. Unto grace I came. Now, I know some religions will tell you that grace started with Yeshua. No, it's all over the Torah. It's been in the Torah at the very beginning, and Moshe starts the entire two pathways discourse calling on mercy, calling on grace, calling on favor. Unto the grace I came. And that is the pattern out of which all of our missions, all of our journeys, all of our efforts, everything we do, the entire mission is based upon coming to grace first. And therefore taking it and receiving it, embracing it, and carrying it. And releasing it. If we are not releasing mercy, we are not of the King. We may be theologians. We may be good at doctrine. We may be good at doing church or synagogue. But unless we're carrying and exuding mercy, we are not representing him. We're not spreading out who he is. So he started with mercy, and now he's gone through these various things, and here's the world, and the gates are open, and here come the people. What do we face? What problems do we have sharing space? Tony, I know this is your kind of area of expertise here. You have to deal with people who sharing space, and they have pathologies. So go ahead.
Yeah, pathologies. I want to go back to when you were saying where this starts, right? The fear of the Lord, where this starts. And when I think about the fear of the Lord, I think about establishing God as the person, establishing Hashem, the Holy One, as the one I'm going to put my trust in, right?
He's the North Star. He's all that.
He's all that. I'm going to put my trust here. And so this fear of the Lord is what opens the way for emunah, right? I'm going to now, I'm going to love him. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to be faithful in this covenant, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life following and trusting his leadership. But we've been wounded, right? I'm going to go back to we have issues and triggers, right? And so leads us back here. So this Tikkun Adam is really important if we're going to be able to share space with those we're going to meet at the gate. There has to be healing in our lives. And so what the Holy One does through his word and the rich encounters that come through the word is he's healing us because he knows we've been wounded. He knows where we were prior to this deliverance. He knew what we were into. He knows Pharaoh. He knows the Egyptian lifestyle. He knows the culture, the oppression and all that. I think where we are right now, Papa B, is we're dealing with people who appear to not be healthy enough to carry his grace.
Okay, Now, Tony has just dropped the bomb. Shock waves and reverberations are going through the room. And the question on the table is, are you? Am I? Am I healthy enough? Or am I still too wounded? Am I still too pathological? Am I still too toxic to be able to be used in this grand plan of bringing a heaven-scented society as a model to the earth? If I go into the gates, is it safe for the other people? You know, you go down the road, you saw a lot more a few years ago, but you see the sign on the back of the windshield, a sticker or something that says baby on board. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to do to you. I mean, ideally, I don't want to hit you anyway. And I don't want to get in your way, and I don't want to cause you trouble. But now I guess I'm supposed to have a heightened sense of responsibility because there's a baby on board. Is there a toxic person on board in this room? Is there a broken, wounded, pathological, unsafe person in this room? Sign on the door, warning. And is it you? Or is it me? Oh, my goodness. Are we ready? And, you know, the thing is, we don't have to be healed completely. But that will take Messiah to return. That will take his establishment of his earthly kingdom for that to fully occur. But the process needs to have begun. And the scar tissue needs to be turning into tender flesh. I love the New Covenant discussions of Jeremiah. When he tells us what the Brit Hadashah is going to be, how the covenant's going to morph and adapt to the greatest potential in the latter days, which is, of course, what we read about in the book of Acts, and we read about in the the writings of Messiah's Talmudim, his disciples. When we read about that, he says this, he says, I will write my law, my Torah in their hearts, and I will take away their heart of stone. Their lev even, their hard, crusty, wounded, scar tissue, broken heart. I will take that away from them, and I will give them a new heart of tender flesh. I will write upon their heart, and my Torah will become their lifestyle in a way that radiates life and gentleness and understanding as opposed to harsh rulings and decrees. It's the same law interpreted through a different heart. That's the beautiful thing about the new covenant. It's the old covenant with a whole new passion, with a whole new fire, and with a whole new level of tenderness that goes way beyond whatever was known before. So this is the idea of sharing space. We have to now learn to share space and realize that we ourselves have been wounded. We ourselves still have triggers and buttons. And therefore, the people that we are dealing with, each one of them, each one we meet, has buttons and triggers too, and has wounds and scars. And our responsibility is there's a baby on board. So take an extra level of caution to watch out for their buttons and not unnecessarily push them and not hit their triggers. We say, well, I don't care. They just need to get adjusted to me. They need to appreciate me and where I am. That's all well and good if you're of the raging nations. It's not good if you are of the King's highway. If you're called to be the special forces bringing the new kingdom to the earth of the heaven-scented society. We have to learn to respect the fact that other people are broken and wounded, and they may act that way. And they may behave that way. Tony works at a facility. And by the way, all of you who gave last week to Chris, to the blessing of this young man who had no clothes but paper scrubs and came and had no suitcase and no nothing because he had no parents, no father, was a fatherless. By the way, we can't post pictures by law. I wish we could to show you his new suits of clothes, his new, all the things, and his shoes, and going to get a haircut. He's going to get the haircut. He now knows somebody out there in the world, and there are people called Biblical Lifestyle Center, but that's not really important. It's just there's somebody out there in the world who actually cares about him and knows he exists when he has no father and no mother, no parents, And that's just the beginnings of Zedekiah, the beginnings of doing things because God wants us to bless people who have brokenness. Look, Chris, not this Chris, not that Chris, the Chris that we're talking about. Yeah. Got your delete going off, sliding off with all my excitement. Okay. That Chris has got broken places. Wounds and scars, you and I could look back and say, ooh, I thought I was bad. I thought what happened to me was bad. I thought what I experienced was a tough life. I'm nothing compared to what he's dealt with. Now, Tony, kind of brings up date. If we're going to deal with people who are broken, some pathologically so they have to be institutionalized. Others not so much. Maybe they should be institutionalized, but they're not. They're just out there looking for cause and trouble. What are the secrets of sharing space?
So one of the things that we do a lot of training in, which is totally biblical, is self-awareness, right? So we know that we have issues. We know that we are dealing with some trauma ourselves to some degree. We know that we have areas in our lives that God's dealing with, that he's working on. And being self-aware helps us to be in the presence of other people and not be consumed with our own stuff, right? And so when we know that we have wounds and issues and things like that, we understand that, and we know God's healing us through his word. But there is a level of awareness where we understand why we are here, right? The mission, as you talked about.
Mission supersedes the feelings.
Correct. One of the things, here's an example of how people who are not as healthy as they want to be or haven't completely returned to that Edenic state of beauty, fruitfulness, and shalom, how they respond. When we put his information before the congregation, when we start talking about it even, one lady got up. One beautiful lady got up.
Before we finished talking.
Before we could finish talking about it, and was up here already. Yeah. She's not claiming to be the healthiest person in this room. No. She's not even claiming to no longer have wounds and issues and scars and triggers. But she was healthy enough to respond to the voice of God, which means that she was not entangled by her woundedness. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affair. She wasn't so entangled in her own woundedness and crises that she couldn't respond to someone else's crises. There was a gentleman that met me out in the hallway before I could get out to get back on the road, who was ready to do something about. He was not claiming to be perfectly healed and as healthy as he wants to be, but his heart was free enough. His life was free enough to respond to God. His mind was free enough to respond to God. We're going to meet people in crises at the gates, right? They are actively in crises, right?
Or on the verge of crisis.
On the verge of crisis. These people are angry.
If you push a button, they'll be there.
They'll trigger. They're angry. They're full of fear. They're worried about their today and tomorrow. They're worried about their Social Security. They're worried about what's going to happen in our nation. They're concerned for their children's safety in the public school systems and all of that. And so they come and they're traumatized by things that have happened in their lives. We often deal with that in our hospital, especially when we deal with the girls that are coming out of the sex trafficking rings. They come with so much trauma. And so when they come, the trauma responses are sometimes they are very manipulative, right? And they're trying to control what they can control because they've lost control of everything else. They're trying to find some area that they can control.
Let me bring this up.
Yes.
I want to point to you because what we're seeing as society begins to respond to the raging of the nations is that people become more and more controlling.
That's right.
That's out of fear, because if you want to control because you're afraid you're losing control.
That's right.
And so you want to control people's ideas. You want to control people's behavior. You want to control the way they dress, the way they look. You want to control the way they believe. You want to control every facet, because if you feel that you have a little control, you're not so afraid of the world anymore. Maybe you feel like you've accomplished something. So you have to understand that as the society goes about the ways of the warring and the raging of the nations, you're going to see more and more people face more and more people with a control problem. And you say, those people are just control freaks. There's a reason they're control freaks, because they're very, very afraid. They have wounds and scars and triggers. Don't push the buttons. Yes. Don't pull the triggers. Learn to understand, to appreciate. This is the idea of dealing with society, bringing another approach into the society that has a heavens sent to it. We need to kind of move on. We got a lot to say, and we could talk about this for hours. I want to talk about el plan de infraestructuras, the plan of infrastructure, the blueprint for infrastructure, for the society con aroma a cielo. Con aroma el cielo. The fragrance, the smell, the scent of heaven. How do we get heaven sent to earth? How do we transmit? We have to acquire it first. We have to visit. We have to entertain it. We have to be in the presence of the scent before we can carry the scent. You know, if you go by friends of mine, they always barbecue. Manuel, we'll barbecue. Barbacoa, man, I'm telling you, it's good. But when you go to Manuel's and you go to where the barbacoa is cooking, you walk away from it and it's all over you because you've been in the presence of the barbecue. You've been in the presence of the fire and the smoke. Have you ever noticed this to take place? So if you want to have aroma el cielo, then what? Cielo, you need to be in the presence of where the fire is. You need to be in the smoke. You need to be caught up where it's going on so that you can absorb it and it comes into your garments and your facial expressions and it's all over you. And, you know, my wife always tells me, you smell like smoke. She gets close to me and says, you smell like smoke. I said, isn't it a wonderful smell? No, it's not a wonderful smell on you. Now, the idea of the smell of heaven, the aroma of heaven is that way. How do we get the aroma of heaven? And how then do we carry it and steward it and keep it flowing on us in the midst of dealing with people who are triggered, people who have faults, who have problems? Well, that's why the Holy One gives us the instructions through Moshe of the infrastructure plan. We have to have a strategy. If we don't have a strategy, we'll just react. Someone will misbehave. Someone will talk out of turn, be a little arrogant, be a little controlling, be a little domineering, be a little manipulative, be a little tricky, shady. And we'll react to that, say, well, I don't have time for that. I got no interest in that. And to some degree, we have to protect ourselves. But the issue is, even if we leave, we need to leave the scent of heaven behind us, the aroma of heaven behind us. So he has to have, if you don't have a vision for how this transaction could bring glory to God, don't enter it. Stay home. But if you're going to go out, have a vision for how your presence can bring light into the world. Now, I want to talk about this. We talk about different ways of infrastructure. And it is always on the two pathways. Everything that he tells us about in this passage about infrastructure for the kingdom of heaven and in society has another alternative ego in the world of the raging nations. The first thing he says is, and in English we read, appoint judges and officers in your gates. Now, I will tell you that those words don't mean what you just thought I just said they would in English. It's Shoftim, V'Shotrim, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about that. But in your gates, in your places of intersection with humanity, the gates of your home, the gates of your village, the gates of your tribe, the gates of your nation, in the places where you interact with other people, make sure you have these two factors, Shoftim and Shotrim, with judges and police. Now, I want the way of the nations, the way of the raging nations. Isn't it interesting that these are the two main things that people are upset about? Right now in America, what are people raging about? those judges. The Supreme Court needs to be whatever. This judge is crooked. Make sure we appoint judges that say our conservative or our liberal viewpoint. We want them on our side. We want judges who are going to rule for us. We don't want judges who are wise and who are following the ways of God and who are bringing the kingdom. We want our way. So the idea, now you have court packing arguments and movements and trying to impeach judges that are doing bad stuff. You see how this is right on the same line. The wavelength of the world, the raging of the nations, is corresponding parallel to another road of having true, faithful judges for us in our lives, in our world. We'll talk about that. The other one is Shoftim, are officers. Does anybody remember the summer of 2021? Defund the police. Cops bad. See the whole the fear, the distrust. I'm saying some of it wasn't earned. I'm just saying that's the world, that's the raging of the nations. And the two very biggest areas that we've heard about in the last few years are the judges and the police and the officers. Now, we have something corresponding to that we're supposed to put in all of our gates. We're supposed to have something, because we're supposed to establish an atmosphere in our gates, in the places we interact with human beings. What kind of atmosphere are you creating when you walk in the room? And what is the scent? Is it a fire burning, or is it a flame of revelation, a sweetness of communication from the Almighty? What is the atmosphere? Learning how to set the tone for your communications, for your interactions. You know, if you're going to go online, if you're going to do social media, don't go into it like the world does. Don't go into it with your feelings on your sleeve and your attitude projecting and your virtue signaling all going out about how smart you are and how dumb they are. Go out to it with an idea. If you're going to go on that media, if you're going to go in any region, any way, go out there with a plan of how you're going to bring the sin of heaven into this. How you're going to avoid triggering as many people as you can avoid triggering. Now, this issue of judges in the gates. So what's this shofet? A shofet, a judge, as we think in English, a judge is not someone who wears a black robe and holds a position and holds an office. Now, one of the things that religion does and government does is try to make you focus on positions, titles, and religion, and what was I going to say? And offices. That's not the kingdom way. Kingdom way doesn't have titles, positions, and offices. The kingdom way is have functions, to have operations, to engagements. So in other words, you are going to go into the situation knowing that you're supposed to be like unto a shofet who brings the wisdom and the words of God with the calmness of heart, that the judicial mindset that other people should have, that without raging, rushing to judgment, without relying upon false information, without getting caught up in the personal involvement with the discussions, impartial but wise, with a viewpoint of the mission and the purpose and the plan person in the environment. So that's, first of all, you should go into every situation like that. Second of all, you should understand that you need to have somebody like that to calm you down. I talk about 3 people on your speed dial. You need to have 3 people on speed dial. 3 people who have demonstrated that they are calm and stay calm and that they don't take sides. 3 people. It's just going to be anybody. It doesn't have to have an office. Doesn't have to have a title. Matter of fact, it's probably better if they don't, because the titles corrupt and pervert. The issue is, do you trust the person by virtue of past experience to be a trustworthy, calm, steady, steadfast person? Now, in Hebrew, we have this thing called the Bet Din, which is 3 judges, 3 people that are on your speed dial, 3 people that you call if you have an issue and you're emotionally caught up in it, and you have a battle and a war, and maybe an offense, and maybe a damage, an injury, and you want to, but you don't go directly to the court system. You don't go to the legal system. This is what Yeshua talked about in Matthew 18. This is what Paul talked about. Paul of Tarsus talked about. The idea is you don't go to the world system to get justice. Heaven help you. You go to people who are operating in the wisdom of God. Yes. People who are operating in the Ahavat Adonai, the love of the Holy One, and the love of neighbor, who have a picture and a vision for the real purpose, the real mission of fixing the world. Fixing mankind and fixing the world. Not about who's right and who's wrong, who should get this, who should get that. Those are the minor issues, all in the greater picture of how can we promote this kingdom of heaven-centered society and advance its purposes and cause it to spread throughout the world. How can we do this and fix bloodlines? Because it's not just the person who's got the offense. It's not just the person who's been hurt or wounded. It's not just the person who's suffered under that or feels angry about it. It's his mother, his father, his brother, his sister, his cousin. It's his neighbor. It's his friend. It's his co-worker. It's those who associate with him. It's go to faith community with him. It's all these people, and we're dealing with bloodlines here. We're dealing with generations and generations. You can't just apply, well, this is right and that's wrong. You have to apply those things in a greater context, and this will fix it. And this will make it better over a course of time. And this will bring healing as opposed to bringing vengeance or vindictiveness. That's why the Holy One said, vengeance is mine. Don't mess with it. It's not something you play with. Human beings are not capable of measuring out vengeance. And he talks about one of that thing, cities of refuge. He said you need to have a prioritization of refuge, not letting mobs do what mobs do. You need to understand what mobs do. It will never help. It will never make things. The majority and the mob are always two things you need not listen to and do not follow in. Don't get caught up in their messes. So he says, have cities of refuge, places where you can go and find out. So things calm down, and you have wise people to administer. If they're guilty, they're guilty. They will go under the law. They will get treated under the Torah's law. But if they are not guilty, the mob will not rule, the mob will not reign. This is one of the things of the administrative system. The other thing is, and we're going to talk about this because we're going to move into the bar mitzvah in just a few minutes, is what Christopher's passage is all about. At the center, at the heart of the whole infrastructure message, he's going to talk about having priests, having people who are in the presence of the Holy One day by day, who do carry his scent. Have those in your community and know who they are and be able to draw from them. He's also talking about Levites, people who have, he's going to have in your community, you should have Levites, those who selflessly serve and are the model of selfless service and attract and inspire you to want to selflessly serve other people, the Levites. There's those, and there's going to be I said, always know there's a revelation stream. There's going to be a prophet. Moshe says, God will raise up a prophet like unto me. And he will speak, and you will shema. You will need to listen to his voice. He says, but warning, other voices will speak to you. And they will be voices, first of all, last week he talked about false prophets. People who just talk because they think they can. They think they have a prophetic gift. And it's all about them and their prophetic gift. It's not about what the Holy One's saying. It's about their prophetic gift and their ministry. He said, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them unless they've proven that they have actually got the tone of the Holy One in their hearts. And the other thing is a cult. Don't listen to the soothsayers and the fortune tellers and the ones who are predicting the future, ones who are interpreting trends and saying, oh, the government's going to fall and this is going to happen, the economy's going to collapse. Don't listen to them because you see it's a cult. They're playing with a realm they do not know about. They're playing with the future, and that realm is God's. It does not belong to human beings. So he says, okay, soothsayers, necromancers, those who have seances, those who speak to the dead, all those people who do witchcraft and enchantments and speak. Don't do this because this was the opposite. You need to be able to listen to true tone. When the prophet, the Navi, the fountain, the Navi means to effervesce, to bubble up, to have something that is a current flow, a fresh flow. You know, a lot of religion is not fresh flow. It's the same old flow over and over again. It's actually recycled water. Maybe once it was fresh, but you know it when it's fresh. Yeah, a few weeks ago, we ran out of water in all the local stores. The spring water that we usually use in our dispensers here So we went and we couldn't find spring water anywhere. I don't know what happened, the supply chain, something, and we couldn't find spring water anywhere. So Rosemary says, well, we got to have some water. So we bought the 5-gallon tap water things. Okay, it's just Texarkana tap water. And we put it up in the place where the usual spring water is. Outside, and you push your button, you got the spring water, it's fresh water. And it wasn't us. You guys didn't complain, but the Oasis group, the church group that meets here on Sundays, they start saying, what's wrong with this water? It's stale. It's nasty. Because, yeah, that's what tells you a little bit about the process. That's what religion does. It makes water nasty. It was once fresh. It was once fresh. Then people started dumping stuff in it, adding things to it, processing it through filters it shouldn't process through. And so you don't get, this is the Navi. Do you have a hunger for the Navi? Do you have a hunger for the true one who speaks fresh water, bubbling out from the earth and the heavens, and as it said of heaven? Well, he's going to have the Navi, and he's going to have the cities of refuge. He says you need to understand that there needs to be witness accountability. First of all, there needs to be a protocol for testimony, true testimony. 2 witnesses. There must be 2 or more witnesses. Because you see, one witness by himself could be colored or tainted. And the witnesses cannot have a stake in the case. They can't be related to the person. They can't be in business with the person. That witnesses only can be people who are totally impartial and just happen to see what they saw. And they can't give their opinions. They can't tell what they feel or how they felt about it. They only can tell what they saw and what they heard for the judges to be able to interpret this. Now, our system in America is way off this base. This is what Torah says. It says also, with regard to the witnesses, need to know they are going to be held accountable if they are lying. Not just about perjury charges. Whatever you did that was going to cause trouble to the person you testified against, it's going to be your sentence too. It's accountability. Now, this is how you get a kingdom of heaven-centered society. You put the infrastructure in place to be able to make sure that whenever the encounters take place, you apply kingdom of heaven principles to it in an atmosphere of kingdom of heaven sent conversations and interactions. In the middle of all that, which is where we're getting to right before the break, in the middle of all that, there's this discussion of somebody that Christopher will talk to us about in just a moment, a few moments. Hamelech, the king, the leader, the civil leader. Now, our king will not be like any of the warring and raging nations as kings. Who reigns on our throne? Who will reign on your throne, the throne of your life? Who will reign on your throne? This is the issue that we're going to face. And he puts it right in the middle of Parsha Shoftim. He says, yeah, the judges and the gates and the officers and the Navi and the Levites and the priests and the system of the witnesses and how you held them accountable. All that stuff's important, but it's all going to be centered upon one thing. Who is your king? And your king is not going to be like other kings. The other kings, what do? They're all in it for themselves. They're all about themselves. Leaders, call them presidents, call them leaders of the Congress, leaders of prime ministers. Whatever position you want to call it in the world, they have their ways, right? You know their ways. But here's what our king is, and I'm not going to steal all his thunder. Let me just say this. Our king operates by self-restraint. He does not do whatever he thinks in the moment. He operates according to a grand plan about serving the people, serving the creation, serving the ecosystem, the kingdom that he has. His is self-restraint and is about not lifting himself up above and not being driven, not being pulled, not being persuaded, not being tempted, not being seduced by the things of this world. Who is our king? Our king is none other than the Messiah, Yeshua, and he will return in that king. And only he fits the description that Christopher is going to read to us in a few moments. Tony, I'm going to let this break come in just a moment. Other thoughts before we go to break about all the things we've talked about?
Only about the because we're calling forth the gatekeepers, right? And that's an important part of this parsha, is calling these gatekeepers forward. And this is what you're talking about with this Shoftim and the Shotrim. When you highlighted a particular scripture in our PowerPoint, Proverbs 23:7. So a man thinketh in his heart, so as he is, what most translation says.
You got it.
Okay. But here you have as one sha'ars, and I want you to talk about that for a second, because that clears that up a little bit. In his nefesh, mind, self-talk, will, emotions, kinhu, or that is who he is. As I looked at this parsha, and I looked at where the Holy One is trying to take us, he's making sure that those who are going to be functioning at the gates know who they are, right? Know who he is and know who they are. That's important for the interactions that we're going to have at the gates. One of the things that has always concerned me is how we interact with other people, right? Especially those of us who are considered to be on earth, the kingdom of heaven sent to society. You said sent. Who are we? What are the messages we're telling ourselves? What's our set of priorities? Because that's what, when you said sha'ar, what's our priority? How do we prioritize our lives? What do we look like in comparison to those who are not operating in the kingdom or functioning from the kingdom of heaven sent to society, don't have those standards, don't have those principles? Who are we? What are the stories we telling ourselves? And I'll say this, and then I need you to talk about this in our close. So I have a place outside that I go and I meditate. It's in my backyard. It's on my patio. But for me to be out there, I have to use these candles that gives off this aroma that repels mosquitoes and all that. Or I can't be in my personals. I can't.
Amen.
Anybody here know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you live in those areas too. You got some? Okay. I'm going to give it to you right after this. So every now and then a mosquito will get through, but for the most case, I can sit out there, and I'm out there probably hours, right? Just in my meditation, especially when it's not as hot as it is right now. I have my Bible, I'm looking, I'm thinking, I'm contemplating, I'm writing, I'm reading. But these fragrances are going on around me, right? And I'm not aware of it. When I come in the house the other day from that experience, now I had been meditating, studying, and all that, doing a good thing. When I came in the house the other day, I did not go to the shower. I went straight to bed, right? My wife, the minute I get in bed, she says, "You smell like..." Hold on a second. How can I be carrying an unwanted fragrance when I've just been in the presence of the Lord? Something was attaching itself to me, a fragrance. I was using this fragrance to repel mosquitoes, gnats, flies, anything that would get in that circle. But I brought in with me from that experience a fragrance that was unwanted and unpleasant. And it's the first thing my wife noticed. Why didn't she notice the word that I had been in? Why didn't she notice the time I had spent in the presence of God? Why didn't she notice the anointing that was on my life from being in his presence? Why is it that the first thing she met was the fragrance, right? The first thing that people meet about you oftentimes is what you're carrying in scent, right? Where does those scents come from? Here's something I thought about, Papa B. We have began to structure our religious systems, our doctrines and teachings to repel adversity and opposition or anything that we think will disrupt or interrupt our faithfulness, our emunah, our relationship with God. And so we carry the doctrines, we carry the fragrances of all of the religious structures, we carry the ideologies that we get from all the people that we trust to talk into our lives, the YouTube channels and all of that. We carry all of that. And though we spend time in the Word of God, the fragrance that people smell on us first is all the stuff we're using other than the Word of God to repel adversity. Right? We got theories and doctrines and thoughts and ideologies, and all this stuff feeds us. And so our time in God's word doesn't have the same impact because we've entrenched ourselves with all these things that we think will help the word of God in our lives, right? This is how we cast out the devils. This is how we run spirits, right? Who are we and what are the stories that we're telling ourselves as one sha'ars in his nephesh? Kinhu.
Kinhu. So he is. Picture a little strange thing for us to talk about in a place like this. It's a card game. Poker going down. Hold'em, I don't know what they're playing. Smoky room. Skilled players, all of them, around the table. As they get their cards and as they hold their cards and as they make their bets and they make their statements, they act. Each one watches the other one because they're skilled. They learn. And you know what? They don't know. They'll never know what their cards are. But they know what their tells are. They can read their tells, okay? This is what he's talking about with the scent. This is what we tend to carry out on the outside of us, and people begin to read what we're against, what we're avoiding, what we're pushing aside, what we're trying to separate from, as opposed to the substance of what we really carry. This is the danger of playing cards with the kingdom in that process. Now, I want to talk about shahar just for a second. It means to separate and divide. It's like, so we call it a gate. A gate is a sha'ar. Sha'arim would be gates. We say the gates mean everything because this is where we interact. This is where it all comes apart. We divide, rightly divide, hopefully we rightly divide. But what we're going to do is we're going to separate us out from other things and other people, or we're going to spread the kindness and the ways of God. It's where we have the ability of influence more than any other place, is the place of sha'ar. How will we divide the truth? How will we divide the wisdom? How will we divide the ways of God? How will we divide the love of God that we have been practicing? The love of neighbor that we've been practicing? How will we divide that and apportion it out into this given situation? How will we perform at the sha'ar, the place of the gate? You see, the gatekeepers, we're all gatekeepers. Oh, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to be in the tents of wickedness, to spend a lifetime in the tents of wickedness. One thing I have asked, that do I desire, that I may stand in the presence, in the temple of the Holy One, and gaze upon his beauty all the days of my life. Now, this is the cards that we carry. We carry this level of intimate relationship with our Creator. We carry his wisdom, we carry his understanding, we carry his plan and his strategy for how to fix the world and fix individual men on the way as the journey. How will we divide this? How will we apportion the goodness? This is the strategies, this is the ways we're going to learn. So we're going to take a few minutes break here. I want to go ahead and get you, we're going to take about 10 minutes. Since there's no food out there yet, there is food coming. I guarantee you there's all the food you want coming after the bar mitzvah. Take 10 minutes, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water. It's not stale water. We got the other water back. And visit for a minute, and come back in, and we'll have a few minutes discussion about the bar mitzvah, and then we'll go directly into it. So, amen. See you in 10.